Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm sure people must be watching this presentation from around the world. My name is Akanksha and I'll be taking this introductory class on Selenium. So today I'm going to cover Selenium, and if I go to the next slide, these are the topics that I'm going to cover today. So I'll quickly go through the slide. Challenges with manual testing, how automation testing beats manual testing, Selenium as an automation testing tool, advantages and disadvantages of Selenium, Selenium versus other tools, Selenium suite of tools as in all the components of Selenium, IDE, RC, Grid, and WebDriver. Hands-on, so we'll be having a use case wherein I'll quickly demonstrate what you can achieve using Selenium WebDriver. So we'll set up environment for the same, and then we'll have some example for that for any web application. Probably we'll take Edureka as an example. All right, so you all must be aware of manual testing because when it comes to attending a course related to automation testing, I've seen that mostly people from manual testing background or those who had automation testing background as well, but they've used other tools like QTP and stuff, they usually take this course. I'll tell you in brief about myself. I've been a developer for 5 years in the beginning of my career, and then I switched to automation testing because I got a chance once to work on automation scripts and I thoroughly loved the work. So that was the time I decided that I'll be completely switching to automation testing. So why is the slide written? You must be aware of manual testing because see, the base is very important. You have to have your manual testing concepts very clear because automation is again automating your manual testing. So the concepts will remain there, they'll remain intact, we'll be just automating them. Okay, so that's a funny slide, and you can see that on the left hand side we've got this registration form with the various sign up fields like username, password, name, address, country, email, sex, language, and then we have to submit it. And there's this poor guy who's working on this web application. He's probably loading these transactions manually and he's all sweat. So if you see here, testing web apps manually involves loading all transactions, downloading those transactions, creating pass-fail reports for each of them, validating the form, taking screenshots for each validation. Poor guy. I'm assuming, let's say he has to do 100 transactions or maybe 1,000 transactions. Can you just imagine his life? Okay, so this is what he's thinking. It's boring, it's time consuming, it's tedious, and there's a tendency to make mistakes and errors because to err is human. And if somebody has to do 100 plus or 1,000 plus transactions, believe me, even I will tend to insert a mistake. Anybody would tend to insert a mistake. So now let's see how automation testing will take over manual testing. Automation testing beats manual testing. And this guy is all smile now. So if you look here, it says automated execution through test scripts. So there's a complete hub of systems, auto generation of result file. So we are maintaining all the result files somewhere, and then auto generation of reports. So we've got these auto generated reports also. So that's the beauty of automation. See, automation is a whole concept in itself. If you talk about which application to automate or how to automate the application. So if this question comes up, I would first ask, so that'll be my cross question, whether I can automate this application or not. What kind of application is it? So the first point is to understand whether we can automate this web application or not. If it is fine to automate that application, then comes this slide. Okay, he has automated all the test cases using test scripts. He's created an automated test suite. We've got multiple systems here in this slide. All right, and then we are getting auto-generated result files. That's what we can do. We can automate the result generation as well. And then we can maintain the result files at a particular location. And then we can also auto-generate the reports as well. So when we'll go through this entire course curriculum, you'll get to know how to do this. When we'll reach framework part, you'll come to know how we can automate this entire process of auto-generating the result files and also creating the reports. Automation testing beats manual testing. So these are the points how they beat manual testing. Faster execution, more accurate, lesser investment in human resources, supports regression testing, frequent executions, supports light out execution. So let's understand all these points in detail. Faster execution. Now, we need to understand why is it faster. So you all will think that, okay, that's the script and we'll just run the script. And that's absolutely correct. But we also need to understand that writing that script takes time. Only the execution of that script is faster. So no doubt the effort put in initially into creating the automation test suite is huge. But looking at the long-term effect of creating that automation test suite is so beautiful that we tend to overlook the effort that has been put in initially. Faster execution. So we've got the steps which are already written inside the script. We just need to run the script and we'll get the result. That's the reason fast execution. More accurate. Why is it more accurate? Because whatever we write inside the scripts, they're predefined. As in, I already know that what is my test case and what do I want to achieve? What should the result be? What is the expected result? So when I'll create my test script, I will also test my test script for its accuracy, and then I'll test the test script for the result as well, which I want to achieve. So that's already been tested in itself so much that of course we can believe on the result it's going to give us. Whereas with manual, let's say I have to do 100 transactions. Same thing. If you go back to the same slide, I have to do the same transaction for the 100th time. Now for 99 times, I didn't make any mistake, but I got so bored. I got so bored doing the same thing again and again. But here, I have to just run the script. And those steps need not be executed manually. It's a script and I just have to run it. Those pre-recorded steps. So that's more accurate for obvious reasons. Lesser investment in human resource. Now, if we talk about manual testing and if we talk about our different companies, okay, I've been into corporate as well. So if you talk about your manual testing team, the strength would be minimum 4 people, 4 resources, and maximum can be anything depending on the project size. Now, if I've got minimum 4 resources also, I'll have to bring them from some other project or I'll have to maybe, hire them. So I'll be investing money in those resources. Whereas with automation, I need 1 or 2 resources to create that automation test suite. Because when it comes to running that suite, we don't need any special expertise. That person just needs to know a few steps to run that automation test suite. So obviously there's less investment in human resources. So we're saving on money as well. Time we already know because that's fast execution. So we're saving on time and we're saving on money as well. Supports regression testing. Now let's understand what regression testing is first and then we'll see how it supports regression testing. Now, regression testing, when I ask my students what is regression testing, they come up with different answers. As in the crux is same, almost same, but yes, of course, different answers. So regression testing, or let's say regression test suite, it's a set of test cases which will always be there. And those test cases were written keeping in mind that these test cases will test the major functionality of the application. We want to check the major flow or major functions or major components of that application. So that's how that regression test suite is created, having major test cases. Now, when it comes to regression testing, it means whenever there's a bug fix, or let's say whenever there's an enhancement, I have to run that set of test cases again because that is testing the major functionality or major components of the application. And with any bug fix or with any enhancement, I don't want that functionality to be broken. So these test cases will remain there always. And whenever I'll get a fix, I'll run this suite. Now, One more point to add, because I don't want you to misunderstand things. When it comes to enhancement, enhancement is a new feature. So if any new feature is getting added to your application, so don't think that you can't add more test cases to your regression test suite. You can add test cases to your regression test suite, and you can remove test cases from your regression test suite. But the point is, it will always have a fixed number, not a fixed actually, but certain test cases that is testing the major functionality or the major call flow, you can say, of your application. So now let's say I'm working on some application and there's a sprint that is running. So I'm working in agile mode, okay? And it's a 15-day sprint. And those who don't understand agile, let's say I've got some work and I have to finish that work, okay, in 15 days. And that work is to do the testing, and the developers or the development team, they'll fix the bugs. So now if I've got a bug fix today, I'll have to insert that fix in my application. I'll get a new build, and then I have to run this entire regression test suite on that new build. Now let's say during these 15 days, I've got bug fixes for 10 times. That means that I have to run this regression test suite 10 times manually. And this regression test suite can have any number of test cases, believe me, depending on your application. It could be 100, 150, 200, 250, 300, any number of test cases. Now, if I have to do that manually again and again the same thing happens. You'll tend to get more bored, you'll tend to insert mistakes, or you'll tend to miss a few steps. What if I automate this entire thing? Because that's something I'm going to run again and again with every bug fix. So why not automate it? But mind you guys, when it comes to automation, the first thing that you should always think is whether it is feasible to automate it or not. Okay? Only when it is feasible to automate the web application, then comes the point of automating it. Okay? So don't misunderstand this, that you can automate anything if that has repeated tasks to do. No, that cannot be done. We first need to come down to this point that whether we can automate it or not. All right? Frequent execution. Again, these 2 points are interrelated. If I have to run a test suite, which is going to take a few seconds or maybe just a few minutes to complete the entire test suite, obviously, even if I'm getting billed for, let's say, virtually any number of times in a day, I can run this automation test suite because that's going to take just a few seconds or maybe a few minutes. So frequent execution of the automation test suite. Supports lights out execution. Now this terminology is technical, which means that even if you're not physically present in front of this testing happening, it will happen anyway. With manual testing, you have to do it manually, but with automation, you just have to run the test suite. So even if you're not there, maybe you're attending some important meeting or you're running some, some very important test case, which is a different thing altogether, or maybe you're working on some different project. So this is the power of automation. You don't have to be manually there, physically there. You're saving on time. You're saving on money. So many things you can achieve. Let's go to the next slide now. Selenium as an automation testing tool. Now, there are a number of tools that are being used in the market. Selenium is taking over all of them, believe me. So there are certain features, or certain plus points, positive points of Selenium, which is, making it dominant over other tools in the market. Selenium is a suite of software tools to automate web browsers. It is open source and mainly used for functional testing and automation testing. It's a suite of software tools to automate web browsers. Now, if you say Selenium is a suite of software tools, basically we're talking about Selenium as a whole. So you must have already heard that Selenium has got Selenium WebDriver, it has got Selenium IDE, it has got Selenium Grid, and it has got Selenium Remote Control. It had actually, but it's obsolete, it's deprecated now, but still it had. Now, there's so many tools in it. We've got these 4 components which will help us automate web browsers or web applications. It's open source. The biggest reason why people are preferring Selenium is this point. It is free of cost. It's open source. Now, even if I have to learn Selenium at home, I don't need any license to buy. For Qtp, you need a license. For Selenium, you don't need to buy any license. You can download Selenium jars on your personal desktop and start practicing. Start working with e-commerce websites or any website that's available on web. Whether you are in United States or in India or any part of the world, you can test the web applications on your own. So that's the biggest reason why people are preferring Selenium over other tools. It is open source and mainly used for functional testing and automation testing. So I'm sure you all must be aware about functional testing. So if you have to do, obviously this functional testing will also be automated. Okay, so writing functional testing and automation testing basically means that you can use Selenium to automate functional testing or regression testing. Supports different PL. PL means programming language. I'm now talking about other features of Selenium, okay, which again are the reasons of Selenium being dominant over other tools. It supports Java, Python, Perl, Ruby, C#, C, JavaScript, and I think a few must not be mentioned here. Supports different OS. So whether you talk about Linux, whether you talk about Windows, any version, whether you talk about Mac, whether you talk about iOS, whether you talk about Android, whether you talk about Ubuntu, all major operating systems are supported by Selenium. Supports different browsers. Now there are just 5 mentioned here, but all major browsers that are available in the market, Selenium has given support for all of them. So here we've got Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, Safari, Opera. Now you have other browsers as well. Selenium is providing support for all of them. Now just imagine, even if you've got a system, okay, which has got Ubuntu. I'll give you an example. Now, generally, people don't use Ubuntu for their personal system as an operating system. But let's say you've got your office laptop, and that's what you have. You can carry it to your home, and Ubuntu is installed in it. But you have to practice Selenium at home. Leave about office, but you have to practice Selenium at home. Selenium is giving support for Ubuntu as well. You can run Selenium on Ubuntu as well. You've got Linux on your system. Selenium is giving it support. And let's talk about the programming languages also. Now, see, I understand that manual testers don't have any programming language knowledge, which is fine, guys, which is absolutely fine. Now, if you have to write, if you've chosen automation testing as your career choice, obviously you must have thought in your mind that you need to learn some programming language. You've got so many options. You can learn Java, you can learn Python, C#, PHP, Ruby, Perl, JavaScript, anything, and you can work with your Selenium scripts. Okay? All right. So let's say, okay, we've got some audience as well at the back end, and they want to understand the difference between functional testing and automation testing. Now, I think this line shouldn't be written this way, first of all, functional testing and automation testing, because you can automate anything. Anything as in you can automate functional testing and regression testing. Functional testing and automation testing. You can automate your functional testing as well. Now let's talk about functional testing because I understand you must be knowing what automation testing is. Let's talk about functional testing. Now regression testing, you know how we do regression testing. Functional testing is dividing your test cases on the basis of components or call flow. Your application could be of any type. It need not be an e-commerce necessarily. It can be any kind of web application, and there'll be some functions, there'll be some call flows. So functional testing will basically test those call flows. Let's say you are signing up. You're signing up on a web application. So the first thing that'll come on the application is the sign up form. Now you'll fill the sign up form. You'll submit it. That record will get stored in the database of that web application. Okay, and then maybe you'll get a prompt that your credentials or your details have been saved successfully. So that's a flow. Okay, filling the form, your details going back to the database, and something being returned. So I want to test that entire flow. So I can do that in functional testing. Okay, now when it comes to automation testing, you can automate functional testing and you can automate your regression test suite as well. Automation testing is that you have to write scripts to run some test cases. Now for this automation testing, you can have individual scripts for practicing, but when it comes to real time, you actually need to create automation test suite. Okay, and how do you create a test suite? By having frameworks or by taking frameworks into your project or creating frameworks. So we'll come to that framework part later. Let's go to the next slide. And I hope you've understood the features that make Selenium one of the best tools for automation testing. Advantages and disadvantages. So we are also mentioning the disadvantages here. Let's understand those as well. We'll talk about disadvantages first, and then we'll talk about advantages. Supports only web applications. Now it doesn't support mobile applications. Okay, it supports web applications and it doesn't even support any desktop application. So that's there. Selenium only supports your web applications. Only user communities available. Now, people say that's a big drawback because if you talk about QTP and if you talk about other tools, all right, major tools that are being used in the market today for automation, they've got a dedicated support. Let's say for QTP, HP is giving a dedicated support for QTP. But here we don't have any dedicated society wherein we can put in our queries or, we can get a result or we can get an answer. We've got thousands of blogs. People have been working with Selenium for long now, and believe me, they've loved Selenium so much that they're writing their own blogs. They are creating their own web pages with the tutorials. So that's there. You will find knowledge. I mean, you'll find something on the web, but there's no dedicated society or community for it. Now, seleniumhq.org is one place where you can believe on the documentation because that's directly coming from the developers of Selenium. So you can trust that. But that's just the documentation. You won't find anything in detail or you won't find programming there. Difficult to set up and use. I don't find it difficult to set up and use, to be honest, but okay, let's say it's a disadvantage. I don't find it as a disadvantage, but let's say it's a disadvantage because if you're working with a programming language, okay, you need some development environment. Selenium doesn't provide any development environment, which means IDE, integrated development environment. So you need to use some other IDE, let's say Eclipse. So if you want to write your scripts in any IDE, you need to do some setup, which you'll have to do for any programming language. Okay, so that's there. You'll have to set up. You'll have to provide things wherein you can write your scripts. So difficult to set up and use. Why use? Because again, I believe that's the programming language thing. You need to have prior programming language knowledge. So be it Java, Python, Perl, Ruby, JavaScript, C#, anything, you need to have knowledge of the programming language. No reporting facility. Now, I consider this as a disadvantage because in WebDriver, which is basically used by all the companies, we don't have any reporting facility here. You either need to include that reporting thing in your framework by automating this, or you'll have to use third-party tools like TestNG. So you'll integrate TestNG along with Selenium WebDriver to get the reports in HTML format probably. Okay, so we've got a question that doesn't support. All right, let me just read the question. So this is from our audience. So it says, when you said Selenium is used only for web testing and does not support mobile testing, how can it support Android and iOS operating systems? So I don't know why you've written iOS operating system, but when I'm saying that it doesn't support mobile applications, so you all know that mobile apps are different. I'm not saying that you cannot open any application on mobile and cannot test it. Okay, what I'm saying is you cannot use Selenium for mobile app testing. Of course, you've got a browser. You can open Chrome on your mobile as well. On that, you can do the testing. That I'm not denying. But if I have downloaded, let's say I've got some application, let's say I've downloaded Mintra, okay, anything as a mobile application that you cannot use, that you cannot test. We've got other tools like APM and stuff for doing that kind of testing. Okay. All right, limited support for image-based testing. Now you can take a screenshot using Selenium, that's there, but you cannot compare two images. Let's say for any kind of verification, you want to compare two images for verification. That is not there in Selenium. You of course can take screenshots, but you cannot compare two images. So these are the disadvantages. There are others as well, which are not listed here. We can talk about them when we'll face those issues while working through the entire course. Okay, these are the advantages. Let's go through them now. Open source software. The biggest reason why people prefer Selenium, or I also learned Selenium on my own. How did I do? I downloaded Selenium jars and I started working with them. And they were so interesting. I started practicing for hours because I could do that on my personal system. So that's the biggest reason people are preferring Selenium. It's free of cost. You can download Selenium jars on your system, import them in your project, and start working with them. Supports multiple programming languages. So we've already seen that point. You talk about Java, you talk about Ruby, Python, you talk about Perl, PHP, C Sharp. I hope I'm not missing anything. Any programming language. You talk about major programming language, and we've got support for it from Selenium. Next one, supports almost every operating system. So that I've already told you, whether you've got Ubuntu, whether you've got any version of Windows, whether you are using Mac, whether you're using Linux, you've got a support for it. Support multiple browsers. So let's say you prefer to work with Chrome. Okay, that's your choice. And it's my choice as well. So your Selenium gives it support for it. Then somebody has a preference to use Firefox. You can work with it. You can work with Selenium on Firefox. Somebody has got a Mac system. Okay, you can work on Safari as well. Now we've got HTML unit. I'm not sure if you've heard about it or not. That's a headless browser, which doesn't have any GUI, graphical user interface. It's a headless browser. We call it headless browser, HTML unit. Okay, now Selenium supports this browser as well. So we've got support for all the major browsers available in the market. Supports parallel test execution. Now that's a whole concept in itself. I'm not going to take it in detail, but I'll just let you understand what parallel test execution means. Now this parallel test execution can also include the term called cross-browser testing. So parallel testing means you're running the same test case parallelly on different browsers. That's cross-browser testing. And you can call it parallel also because you're running the test cases parallelly. You can run different test cases parallelly on different instances of the same browser. Listen to me carefully, because parallel can be running test cases parallelly, but it depends on you how you want to run them, whether you want to run the same test cases on different browser, or whether you want to run different test cases just to speed up on different instances of the same browser. So that's parallel testing, and we can achieve parallel testing by implementing TestNG along with Selenium WebDriver. We can achieve parallel testing by using grid also. So when I'll come to grid portion, I'll explain how beautiful it is when it comes to testing your test cases parallelly on different kinds of systems. When I say different kinds of system, it means having different operating system, different browsers. So that's another feature. Provide support for frameworks, TestNG, JUnit, and NUnit. So these are again testing frameworks. Okay. So when TestNG combined with Selenium WebDriver, it will take over the disadvantages. Majorly this one. We don't have any reporting facility. With TestNG, I can get well-formed HTML reports. Now, parallel execution, if I want to run my test cases parallelly, I can take help of TestNG. JUnit is again your Java unit testing framework. Okay, that's basically used by your developers for unit testing purpose. And NUnit is again the same thing like JUnit, but it's used for C, for a different language. So these two are basically used by developers for unit testing purpose. TestNG, which is called Test Next Generation, that's an advanced version, you can say, of JUnit with added features and functionalities. So when we'll come to TestNG, we'll take this in detail. Let's go to the next slide now. Selenium versus other tools. So here we will be discussing three different tools: QTP, IBM RFT, and Selenium, and we'll compare all of them on the basis of a few features. License. Required for QTP and IBM's RFT, Selenium is open source. So these 2 points, license and cost, they are interrelated because the major cost goes into licensing. See, all three of them are automation test tools. Okay, so when it comes to putting in the effort, or when it comes to using human resources, it's one and the same thing for all three of them. But when it comes to licensing, costing in terms of license, for both of them we need, but for Selenium, it's free of cost. So that's the reason cost is high here and less because it is open source. Customer support, we've already discussed this. For QTP and RFT, we've got dedicated HP support for QTP, and for RFT, we've got a dedicated IBM support. But Selenium is an open source community. We don't have any dedicated support. Hardware resource consumption during script execution. That's high here. Now, I haven't used QTP and RFT, so I really can't comment on this part, that how hardware resource consumption is high here. Okay, Selenium has always been my choice. I've always loved to work with Selenium. It's low here because all you need is your personal system as far as your hardware is concerned. Okay, and you need to have one IDE. That's it, and you can, and your programming language, of course, and you can start writing your scripts. Download your jars and start writing your scripts. So we don't need much, we just need one setup. That's your personal system, your PC or your laptop. Coding experience. It's not much for QTP. For RFT it is required, and for Selenium it should be really good. Should be very good, along with technical capabilities of integrating the framework. Now, integrating is the second thing. For even writing the scripts, you need to have programming language knowledge. So it's my advice that if you think that you want Selenium as your automation, as your career choice using Selenium, start working on your programming language concepts parallelly. That's very important. Environment support. We can run QTP only on Windows and RFT only on Windows. But look at this. Windows, any version of Windows, believe me. Linux, Solaris, and it says if browser or and JVM or JavaScript support exists. Now that's there. Obviously, we should have browser support for these operating systems. So there are just three mentioned here. You can have Mac, you can have Ubuntu. Okay? All the major operating systems are supported by Selenium. Language support. QTP, for this we need VB knowledge. For RFT, we need Java and C# knowledge. But if you want to write your scripts in Selenium, if you have knowledge in any of these programming languages, you can work with it. The features are so good that obviously anybody would love to work with it. This is not a drawback, open source community. It could be in a few scenarios in case of major bugs, okay, but I haven't felt that there's any major bug so far. I haven't come across any major bug here. But even if there's an open source community, believe me, you get the answers. Let's say you're stuck somewhere. You just Google it and you'll get millions of answers. So it could be a drawback, but not that major. And these points obviously are taking over QTP and RFT. Let's go to the next slide. Selenium suite of tools. We've got 4 components of Selenium here. Okay, IDE, RC, WebDriver, and Grid. And before I go ahead with this, let me just mention that RC has been deprecated. From Selenium 3 onwards, which is the latest version of Selenium, so there was a life cycle. Okay, we had Selenium 1, we had Selenium 2, and now it's Selenium 3. In Selenium 3, RC has been deprecated and has been moved to a legacy package. Okay, IDE, RC, WebDriver, and Grid. So version 1 had IDE, RC, and Grid. There was no WebDriver in Selenium 1. Version 2 had IDE, RC, WebDriver, and Grid. Version 3, IDE, RC, WebDriver, and Grid, but then you can consider it not being there as well because it's been deprecated now. We've mentioned this here for the reason that there might be people around the world who are still using RC, but that's moved to a legacy package now. All right. I've never used RC. I've been using Selenium for a long time now, but then I never used RC. So it's been years people gave up on RC because of its drawbacks. So I'll come to that when we'll discuss the difference between RC and WebDriver. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so that's about IDE. Selenium IDE is a Firefox plugin which is used to create and execute test cases. IDE is Integrated Development Environment. And if you read this line carefully, it's a plugin which comes only for Firefox, which is used to create and execute test cases. So you can create and execute test cases here. I'll just quickly give you a demonstration. Let's go through the slide now. It records and plays back the interactions with the user, which the user had with the web browser. Record and play. We also call it a record and play tool. Why? Because let's say you open up this plugin and you're working on any web application. Whatever you're doing on a web application, it gets recorded as the steps inside this IDE. So that's called recording. Now you can play back these steps again. So we've got these two buttons. If you can see here, there's a green button here with a single hash, and there's one with 3. So that's for a single test case, and that's for a test suite. Okay, we can run these steps again using these buttons. So I'll just demonstrate that in a few moments. Using IDE, you can export the programming code in different languages. Now that's a good feature in IDE. I don't prefer to use IDE. I'll tell you about that, why I don't prefer using IDE. But yes, this is a good feature. Let's say for syntaxing, or let's say for prototyping, you want to understand how should I write a code for executing a test case in Selenium. Execute the same test case using Selenium IDE, record these steps, okay, and then we've got an export feature here using which you can export these steps in a programming language format. So you'll get the entire script in that particular language that you choose. So no. So we've got a question, can't we use Selenium IDE in Chrome? No, you can't use. That's a Firefox plugin. It comes only as a plugin for Firefox and not any other browser. All right? Okay, so let me quickly check what is there in the next slide, and then I'll give you a demonstration. So these are the features. Before I come to the features part, now let's quickly see what IDE is. So I'll just open up my Firefox now. Now, first of all, I'll tell you how to get IDE, okay? Don't go here and go to plugins for getting IDE. Please don't do that. What I want you to do is just write down, or maybe you can directly go to seleniumhq.org, okay? This is the link which you can support for documentation, which you can trust for documentation. Go to this one, because all the documentation here, it's coming directly from the Selenium developer. So it's trustworthy. Now go to download here. And you might just have to scroll down a bit to find IDE. Okay, it's right here. Now can you see that Selenium IDE? Download latest released version from addons.mozilla.org. So you're supposed to get IDE from this link and not through the menu here. Click here. It says add to Firefox. I already have it, so I'm not going to click on add to Firefox. If you want to get Selenium IDE in your Firefox, just click on this button. It might ask you to restart Firefox, restart, and you'll get an icon looking like this. Can you see here? That's Selenium IDE. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on it. A plugin window will get opened up. So that's exactly what we just saw inside the slide. This is another window. It's a plugin for Firefox. Okay. You have this record button which is already enabled. If you can read it, now recording, click to stop recording. That means whatever you'll do on your Firefox browser, this tool or this plugin is going to record it in steps. And then these are the buttons to play them. So what I'm going to do is I'll pull it down. Okay, I'll just minimize it. We'll do something on Firefox and let's see what gets recorded here. So let's say I'm going to open Amazon. Okay, now I'm opening Amazon, and then let's say I'm going to today's deals. I've got today's deals here, and let's say I want to click on books. So I've selected books here. Okay, and I've got these books. Now let's open up what has come up in IDE. Can you see? We've got a few commands here. These are called Celanese commands because IDE is written in a language called Celanese. I don't remember the developer's name. He's a Japanese person, and he created IDE. There's not one person who's created the entire Selenium suite, okay? There are different people involved, and we'll get to know about them. So this one, IDE, was written by some Japanese developer. I don't remember his name now. So these are Selenium commands. Open, click, click, and wait and click. Okay, so this URL, there's this URL here. And when you click on these commands, you get the reference. You can read the reference on this window here. I'll just maximize it for you all. Okay, so if you click on any of the commands, you'll get to know what this command is all about. This open URL, it says argument is URL, the URL to open may be relative or absolute. Opens up a URL in the test frame. This accepts both relative and absolute URLs and the entire detail about it. Now let's say I want to choose this one. Click. So the argument is locator, an element locator. Clicks on a link, button, checkbox, or radio button. So that can be anything which you can click on, right? This basically performs a click. So it can be a link also, it can be a button also, it can be a radio button, it can be a checkbox, anything. Click and wait. Clicks on a link, button, checkbox, or radio button. If the click action causes a new page to load, read this carefully. If the click action causes a new page to load, call wait for page to load. So that's been done internally, okay? If it knows that this click has happened on a link which is opening another page, it is going to wait for that new page to get loaded. All right, these are Selenium commands. Now let's say I want to run these steps again. How do I do that? I can click on this, play current test case, and you can just stop it here. So I've stopped it, which means these are my recorded steps. And if I want to play these steps, I'm going to play them, and please pay attention on the browser. Okay, that's your Firefox. I'm going to play them. Please pay attention. So it has opened up Amazon. You should click on today's deals now, right? And then I think I chose books, so it should check this checkbox. So we've got the books now. So it records and it plays back the recorded steps. That's what IDE is about. Now there's more to it. All right. You just saw in the slide that we can export the test cases. If you want to save the test case, you can save the test case. You can save it as also. You can do that on your own. Let's understand the export feature. That's export test case as. Just look at the option. Take a few seconds to read these options. So it is providing support for C#, Java, Python, Ruby. I will be telling you about Selenium WebDriver along with TestNG and Java, right? So I'm going to use Java, I'm going to use Selenium WebDriver, and I'm going to use TestNG. Let's say I want these steps in that language format. I will use this option, Java, TestNG, and WebDriver. Let's say I've chosen this. It is asking me to save this file. I think I clicked on it twice. Let me just close this. Okay. And if you open it, that's a whole Java file using Java, Selenium WebDriver, and TestNG. These @ if you see here and here, okay, these are TestNG annotations. So you won't understand the annotations as of now because we haven't gone through TestNG, but this is coming because I chose TestNG as the option. And of course, you understand that this is these functions and these classes, that's a Java concept, programming language. And these functions, driver.manage, or driver is equal to new Firefox driver, or maybe declaring this WebDriver driver, which is a private instance. This is coming from Selenium. So this is a full-fledged script. Now people ask me that why can't we use IDE? No guys, if you want to use IDE, you'll never learn Selenium. You can use IDE if you want to do some prototyping, you want to prototype your project, or let's say you want to understand the syntaxing. If I'm using, let's say, alert handling, how should I handle it? So that can be done here. For that purpose, you can use them. But if you just rely on these scripts, you can't learn Selenium. Plus, there are other things also which you can't do with Selenium. You can't do your regression testing or the entire functional testing. Okay, you can run small scripts, you can create small scripts, but you cannot do a full-fledged testing here. And it's clearly written, even if you go to the documentation on seleniumhq.org, it says that it's basically for prototyping and syntaxing. Don't prefer it for a full-fledged testing, right? Plus, there are other things also. Let's say you want to do looping. Looping as in you want to perform something again and again. You can't do it with Selenium. You can't take a screenshot here. Plus, let's say you want to do data-driven testing. Now, data-driven testing is when you want to provide data set for your testing. You can't do it here. You can't provide the whole data set here for testing. So when it comes to Selenium IDE, I tell my students, please keep it limited. You can use it. There's no harm in it, but don't make it a choice. All right, let's get back to the slideshow now. Okay, so that's the IDE features. Create and edit test cases. Okay, you can edit them also. I'll just show you how you can edit them. So you've got this, right? You've got a command and you've got a target. Now you can edit this. You can add a value to it. You can, maybe change this command. So you can edit the script as well. You just have to click on that command and you've got these 3 fields, right? Let's get back. Create and execute test suites. So you saw that there were 2 things. There was this green button with a single bar and there was a green button with 3 bars, green bars, right? So that was for playing the entire test suite. So let's say if you want to have multiple test cases, you run multiple test cases, save them, then add them as a new test suite. So you've got that option also to create a new test suite there. Debug and enhance test cases. This and this are almost the same. You can debug them, you can enhance the test cases. You can add more steps to them. Test cases can be exported to different programming language, that you've already seen, and I think that's the major thing that you should know about IDE. Enables learning of Selenium's script syntax. So, like I mentioned, when it comes to syntaxing or prototyping, that time you can use Selenium IDE. But when we'll get to WebDriver, believe me, you'll forget IDE. You'll forget IDE. Initially, it's okay to just understand, okay, if I'm executing these steps, how would they look? How would these steps look inside a JavaScript? For that purpose, you can use it initially, but don't make it a choice. I'll keep that repeating. All right, let's go to the next slide. I believe there are no questions from the audience, from the current audience. These are the drawbacks. Let me complete this as well. Supports only Mozilla Firefox. So that's a plugin for Firefox, and it doesn't come as a plugin for any other browser. Not suitable for dynamic web applications. Why is it not suitable? See, what is dynamic? Dynamic means when something can change at any point of time. It's not static. It's not going to remain the same all the time. It's going to change dynamically. Now that dynamic thing could be the entire page or it could be a few elements of the page, right? Now we cannot handle dynamic elements using Selenium IDE because let's say for security reasons, I am dynamically changing the HTML ID of my password field in a login form. Just an example. So if I have to log in on that website using IDE, I can't do that because the next time that pre-recorded script inside IDE will run that test case, it'll fail because the ID will change. Whereas when it comes to WebDriver, we can handle dynamic elements very well using XPath and its features, XPath functions. So we'll come to that later when we'll understand finding elements and details. No support for programming logic or a language. As in you can't, it automatically, you can't write your own scripts. You can export scripts, but you cannot write your own scripts. It's an IDE. It's not a programming interface. Okay? It's an IDE. Data-driven testing not possible. That I mentioned that you cannot do testing when you have to provide a data set. Let's say you want to give 100 user IDs and passwords and you want to test a login form. That cannot be done using IDE. No centralized maintenance of objects and elements. Now that's a huge point, as in you first need to understand what are objects and elements. Then only you can understand what do you mean by no centralized maintenance of objects and elements. So I'll briefly tell you right now, then when we'll get to WebDriver, I'll tell you about objects and elements in detail. Anything that you see on a web application. I'll give you an example. Let me open up Chrome. So let's say I'm opening eBay.in. Okay. Now that's a whole page with various elements. Elements as in this sign in link, this register link is an element of this page. These links, deals, sell, help and contact, track my order, my eBay, my PasaPay, this cart icon, the search button, this drop down, this list in the drop down, okay, these options in the drop down, these images, all of them are elements of this web page. You can also call them objects. Okay, we'll talk about them in detail later. These are called elements of the web page. Let's go back to the presentation. No centralized maintenance. So we do not have anything that maintains these elements. No centralized location. Now when I'll be telling you about finding elements, I'll be also talking about HTML document, DOM, which is called data object model, okay, which actually is the entire model of the objects of the web page. So we'll talk about those things in detail later. So for now you understand there's no repository wherein you can save these elements or objects on the web page. No centralized repository. So these are the drawbacks of Selenium IDE. Okay, we're coming to the next component of Selenium. Selenium Remote Control is used to write web application tests in different programming language. But what is remote control? So that's an entire thing we need to understand. First, what was RC, how it came into existence. Let's go through the slide. And before I explain this slide in detail, I'd like to explain the difference between RC and WebDriver, for which I've created a document for my students. Okay, so I'll explain that document and then we will understand the slide in detail. Selenium Remote Control is used to write web application tests in different programming language. So that was also an interface which was letting us test web applications. It interacts with browsers with the help of Selenium RC Server. Now that's again a new thing. You won't understand it. RC Server communicates using simple HTTP GET POST requests. Drawback is that every communication with RC Server is time consuming and hence RC is slow. But why is it time consuming? I'm going to explain that. Selenium 3 onwards, RC has been deprecated and moved to a legacy package. That's an important point about RC. See, for your knowledge, or maybe down the line if you get this question in your interview, for that purpose I'm going to explain the difference between RC and WebDriver. Otherwise, guys, believe me, you don't need to get into the intricacies of RC. It's been deprecated. Nobody is using. I believe nobody would ask any question. They might just ask you the difference, but they will never ask you what RC was, how to write the functions there. I have never used RC. I've been working with Selenium for years now. So I'll just quickly open up my folder. Okay, so I've created this one, RC versus WebDriver. I'll just go through the first few paragraphs so that you understand the difference. Now what will I do? I will read every paragraph first and then I'll explain it. Okay? All right. Jason Huggins realized. Now before I read this line, let me introduce Jason Huggins to you. He was the developer of the first Selenium JavaScript, Jason Huggins. Okay? Jason Huggins realized that the repetitious manual testing of their application was becoming more and more inefficient. So he was a tester, okay, and he had created a script. But before he created the script, he was testing his application and was running a few steps which were repetitious. So he thought that this is making my testing inefficient. It is wasting my time, all right? So he created a JavaScript program. Understand this. That's why I've highlighted these points. He created a JavaScript program that would automatically control the browser's actions. You understand this point? Automatically control browser's actions. If you don't know, your browsers, the language behind your browsers is also JavaScript. So JavaScript can very well control your browser's behavior. So what he did, he created a JavaScript program so that using that script, he can control the browser's actions. That's how he was trying to automate the manual testing part. He named this program as JavaScript Test Runner. So that was the name he gave it initially. Now, looking at the potential in this idea to help automate other web applications, he made it open source, which was later renamed as Selenium Core. So this JavaScript test runner actually became Selenium Core. So if anybody asks you what was the very first thing that came into existence, Selenium Core was the first thing that came into existence in Selenium's life or Selenium's life cycle. It was not the RC server, it was Selenium Core. Okay? And what was it? It was a JavaScript program. Now let's understand what the same origin policy issue was. So what I'll do, I'll create a notepad so that you remember how this entire thing came into existence. So first it was a JavaScript program, right? JavaScript program. And what was it? It was called Selenium Core. So Selenium Core was the very first thing. I'll just expand it. Okay, now let's read the next paragraph. The same origin policy issue. It prohibits JavaScript code. Understand it. It prohibits JavaScript code from accessing elements from a domain that is different from where it was launched. I'll read it again. Same origin policy prohibits JavaScript code from accessing elements from a domain that is different from where it was launched. What does this line mean? It means, let me open up something. I'll close this now, guys, okay? And I'll open up Firefox. Now, let me open Google, okay? Google.com. And I'm gonna open Firebug. I'm using Firebug to inspect elements, okay? We'll talk about these plugins. So I've downloaded Firebug. Now, let's say I'm gonna inspect this. I'm taking this example. I've just taken it arbitrarily. It's not that it's my choice. I've just taken it. So I'll have to find out. All right, okay. Now that's an entire HTML code, if you can see here, with head and body, right? So head generally has your title and stuff, and the body has the visible page content. So that's the body, having visible page content. We've got different divisions, we've got scripts, we've got styling, we've got internal divisions. So if I just scroll it down, you will see as and when I hover mouse on various HTML elements, okay, something is getting highlighted, right? And then you come to this div, which is, you know, highlighting the entire page. And then let's say I'm selecting this div, so it is highlighting only this middle thing. Now that's this entire HTML document is basically this page, the HTML code for this page. This point regarding same origin policy is saying that if you've got a JavaScript is not allowed to access any element from another web page that is beyond this domain. So what is my domain? My domain is google.co.in and I'm on the search page, right? Now Google has got a number of things. It has got Gmail, which is called Mail. Okay, it has got other applications as well. So what I'm trying to say is if you're working with google.com, from any JavaScript within this page, you cannot access elements of yahoo.co.in. That's against the same origin policy. According to same origin policy, you will never be allowed to write anything within the script which will access elements on yahoo.co.in. Why? Because it's not under the same domain. Now, if you're working in the same domain, let's say you're working with google.com. So whether you're working with search, whether you're working with images, whether you're working with Google Drive, whether you're working with Gmail or any other page within google.com, it can be allowed. But if you're going beyond this domain, it will not be allowed. Okay, so this was same origin policy issue. I'll just read this paragraph. Okay, HTML code in google.com uses JavaScript program randomscript.js. Now I'm not certain about it, I just took it from the web. The same origin policy will only allow randomscript.js to access pages or elements within google.com, such as google.com/mail/login/signup. But if you want to access pages or elements from different sites, such as yahoo.com/search or anything else, you won't be allowed to do that. Why? Because both of them are in different domains. So this was same origin policy thing. Now, why have I explained same origin policy? Because that was the drawback with Selenium Core. It was a JavaScript program which was hacking your browser. Why? Because through that program, JSON was trying to control the browser's actions. Now, even browser needs to understand whether the script which has been inserted inside me and the web application along with the web server that I'm going to control or which is going to run over me on this browser, they are under the same domain or not, right? So let's just go to the next paragraph. And if you want to learn about this in detail, okay, you're more than welcome to go through the wiki pages of same origin policy thing. Now, if you can see here, this diagram is again taken from the web. These are the HTML pages in some domain called ABC, and there's a JavaScript controlling these pages. But if you try to control this page inside domain XYZ through this JavaScript, you can't do so. That's what same origin policy is. This is the reason, listen to this very carefully, this is the reason why prior to Selenium RC, testers needed to install local copies of Selenium Core, a JavaScript program, and the web server containing the web application being tested so that they belong to the same domain. So what were these testers required to do? He made it open source. Jason made it open source, Selenium Core. But the thing was, we needed Selenium Core and the web server along with the web application on the same system. That's not always possible. So this was the issue in Selenium Core. Now came the existence of Selenium Remote Control. Okay. Now, unfortunately, testers using Selenium Core had to install the whole application under test and the web server on their local computers because of the restrictions imposed by same origin policy. So, another ThoughtWork engineer, that's what I said in the beginning. There is a whole team involved. There's not just one person, there's a whole team involved behind the Selenium generations, okay? So Jason again created Selenium Core. Then another ThoughtWorks engineer called Paul Heyman, he created your Selenium RC. So the next thing was Selenium RC, which came into existence. And what was RC? It was a server. Selenium RC, which is remote control. I'd rather write remote control. And what was it? It was a server. You can call it a standalone server because I'll tell you in a while what it was doing. Decided to create a server that will act as an HTTP proxy to trick the browser into believing that Selenium Core and the web application being tested come from the same domain. The system became known as Selenium Remote Control or Selenium 1. I'll repeat this line again. The Paul Heyman, what did he do? He created a server. Okay, this was a server. It could be a standalone application. What was the server doing? Before running any test case, he had to start the server. And after starting the server, what was happening? The server was actually inserting an HTTP proxy to trick the browser. Okay, where does the proxy go? Proxy goes into the browser to trick the browser into believing that core and the application under test, they are coming from the same domain. Now there's an entire history behind it, how to do this. Okay, now I am not going to explain that part, how it does that, though I've mentioned it in this document. Probably I can upload it if possible. Okay, I'll upload it. I'll try and upload it. So how it did this, HTTP proxy injection was happening inside the browser so that your browser understands, it was tricking the browser into believing that core, your Selenium core, and your web application under test, they're coming from the same domain. Now when this thing is over, okay, when your browser can understand, okay, fine, both of them are coming from the same domain, no matter whether your application under test and your core are on the same system, local computer. But still, since we've injected this proxy, because what this proxy will do, it will create a fictional URL. So that's a whole concept. It'll create a fictional URL so that this URL, when this URL is called, it will be believed that core and your URL or your web application, they are under the same domain. That's how your RC came into existence. Now, why is it called that RC was a slower system? RC was a slower system because if you look at this, you need to first start the server so that this HTTP proxy gets injected. Now, if you've started the server and then you're providing the instructions to whom? To Selenium core, and Selenium core is passing the instructions to browser. So it was the whole cycle. First server will be started, then the instructions from your script will go to core, and core will provide the instruction to browser. There was also no direct communication, so this entire process was very slow and hence taking time. Okay, I'll just go back to the slide, and we've got a few questions as well, so I'm going to take that up as well. All right, so because of this, the system became slow. All right, so we've got a few questions. Rajat, let me just expand it. We have some audience here. Raul, do you want me to explain same origin policy again? I would rather prefer that you go through the wiki page because that explains it beautifully, what same origin policy is. But I think I've covered this part, that how it is denied, that you cannot access any page or HTML code from a different domain inside a domain which you're currently working. Rahul, do you get it, or do you want me to explain it again? All right, no answer. So what we're going to do, we're going to quickly go through the slide. RC server, okay, that's the basic thing. RC server communicates using simple HTTP GET and POST requests. So when we have this web application conversation, all right, when you want to get something, then you use HTTP's GET command. And when you want to post a request, you use POST command. So there's entire thing, GET, POST, delete, and update. If you've heard about them, they're called CRUD operations, right? Create, what was R? That was CRUD only, update and delete. Right? Drawback is that every communication with RC server is time consuming and hence RC is slow. Now I believe that you understand this point because I've already told you how server, first running the server, then sending the instructions to core, and then core was sending the instructions to your browser. So it was a long process. I don't know if, I'm not sure if you've got that diagram here, otherwise I'll quickly create that diagram and explain. No, we don't have. So what I'm going to do, just give me a second. Let me see if I have that in my document, that diagram. I'll explain that to you, okay? That's for web driver. Yes, that's here. So if you look here, all right, now let's say these are your Selenium commands, okay? It's a script in this diagram because this is again taken from web. I haven't created this one. Consider it as your Eclipse IDE and you've got a whole script here. You have to run the server first so that it injects the HTTP proxy. Now the server coming up will also take a few seconds. Then what you have to do is browser with Selenium core injected. So you've got a browser, and obviously any application is running over a web server. Now when you send the instructions, server will get started. Your instruction will go to Selenium core, who is sitting inside your browser. Selenium core will then send the instruction to your browser. So there was no direct communication between your script and the browser or the web application. Two more things are in between, your RC server and your Selenium core. This thing was making it slow. All right, Drawback is that every communication with RC server is time consuming and hence RC is slow. Now that I have explained the diagram also, I believe you've got this point. From Selenium version 3 onwards, RC has been deprecated and moved to a legacy package. Let's go to the next slide. My favorite tool and most widely used, WebDriver. WebDriver is a programming interface to create and execute test cases. It's again the same thing. The base is again the same. This is also an API. It's a programming interface. And we can create and execute test cases here. Test cases are created and executed using elements, object locators, WebDriver methods. So let me explain at this point, how do you use object locators to find these elements? Why is it important to find these elements? And what are these WebDriver methods? Okay, I'm not going to cover the coding part because we'll see that when we'll run the use case. Okay, so let's say I'm opening up Amazon. Now let's say I want to do a search on this page. How will I do the search? What will be the manual steps? So the manual steps would be to choose a category. First, click on this drop down, choose a category. So let's say I want to click on electronics. And then I just want to type in iPhone 7. Okay. I'm saying I want iPhone 7. And then after giving this text inside this text box, I want to click on it. Okay. Now I've got these options, the colors and stuff, jet black 128 GB and then black 32 GB. Let's say I want to click on Apple iPhone 7 black 32 GB. So this another link opens up. Now if I have to automate these steps that I've just done, that I've just performed, how will I do that? These are the various elements like I explained on this page. Everything that you can see on this page, whether it is a text or an image or a drop down or a text box or a button or these links or these images, okay, everything that is visible on this page is its element. You can also call them objects. Okay, if I have to automate any action, any process, I first need to find out this drop down. Let's say I want to entire this process which I just did. I first need to find out how this drop down can be taken care of. How will I do that? I need some technique for it, right? Until and unless I'll have this element, I cannot click on it. Now once I get this element and click on it, now I need to get this list. Then only I'll be able to choose a category. When I choose a category, I'll be clicking on it, right? Let's say I've clicked on books. Now this is a text field. I need to get inside this text field and I need to type something here. Let's say how life works. I first will found this text field, then I will send this text inside this text field, then I will find this button, search button, and then I'll click on it. The point here is, if you want to automate any action or any process, you first need to find these elements. Then only you can perform action on them. How do you find these elements? So for that, in Selenium, we've got different element locator techniques. Okay, I'll just write this down here. To find web page elements, you need to use some locator techniques. Okay, so I'm not saying that you have to use these locator techniques in Selenium. The other tools must also be using some technique to find these elements. Then only they can automate them. In Selenium, we've got 8 element locator techniques, which means in 8 ways I can identify these elements and then I can act upon them. Let's get back to the slideshow now. It is saying test cases are created and executed using elements. So now you know what elements are. Object locators. Without locators, you can't find these elements. WebDriver methods. Now, whatever action you will perform, these are those methods. WebDriver methods will let you perform action on the elements that you will find using one of the object locator technique. This is what this line means. Selenium WebDriver has programming interface, not IDE. WebDriver is an API, and you can have this in a form of jar. You can use its classes, you can use its interfaces, you can use the functions written inside this interface. It is not an IDE. IDE means it doesn't have any integrated development environment of itself. That's the reason we choose Eclipse or NetBeans or any other development environment to write our scripts. Selenium IDE supports only IDE, doesn't have programming interface. So when we were going through IDE, you just saw that we don't have any programming interface, as in I cannot call any interface or any function or any class within that. But yes, of course, I've got a development environment there. Fast as it interacts with browser directly. Now with WebDriver, we got rid of RC server, we got rid of your core as well. We do not need any core now. So my script is going to interact directly with the browser. That's the reason it is much faster than RC. Let's go to the next slide. Selenium suite of tools, again, we've got this WebDriver. Each browser has its own driver on which the application runs. Selenium WebDriver makes direct calls to the browser. Initially, this point is difficult to understand because it is using terms. If you've just heard of Selenium or if you've just decided to work with Selenium, you might not have heard about them. Each browser has its own driver. What does this mean? On which the application runs. Selenium WebDriver makes direct calls to the browser. Okay, have you ever thought that if I'm writing a script and in the script I'm finding HTML elements using some object locator technique, let's say, okay? Now I've found these elements and I'm performing action on them. Let's say I want to click on the drop down and I'm doing that inside my script. Now when I run the script, how will my browser understand that script? Because obviously that actions are going where? They're going to the browser. How will my browser understand that script? Have you ever thought of it? Because I said Selenium supports, we've already seen that it supports all the major browsers. For every browser in Selenium, we've got a driver. You can call this driver again as a server, okay? Now, whenever we run a test case, we first need to choose that on which browser I want to run my test case. So that will be the first thing to decide. If I am going to use WebDriver, on which browser am I going to run the test case? Let's say my choice is Chrome. So I need to tell my script that you're supposed to open up Chrome first. Now once Chrome opens up, how is it going to take the instructions? It is going to take the instructions only when I have this driver running. So you understand it as a server. Now it's not a small thing and we don't want to get into the intricacy. See, even if there's a server running, there has to be some protocol written inside your API and written inside this driver. That's how they'll interact with each other and that's how your browser will understand the instructions. So we don't want to learn about that protocol, what protocol it follows. No, what we want to know is that there's a server which I need to run before sending the instructions. So for that, I need to have this driver. Okay, so I'll talk about the major ones for Windows. So let's say I'm working on Chrome. So for Chrome, I have got an executable file. See, what are servers? They're standalone files. And what are standalone files? Executable files. So for this, I have got a Chrome driver .exe. That's an executable file which you can download. Okay, for Firefox, prior to version 3 of Selenium, we were not supposed to download any driver for Firefox because that came inbuilt with Selenium jars. So that was not required. But Selenium 3 onwards, we need this driver called geekodriver.exe. We need to download it if we want to run our test cases on Firefox. Similarly for Internet Explorer. Okay, we've got these drivers. It is called iedriver.exe. And if you want to see all these drivers, I'll tell you where you can find them. So if you want to work with your Selenium scripts, along with the Selenium jars, you also want these drivers. So what you can do is go to Chrome, open up seleniumhq.org. Okay, seleniumhq.org. Again, go to the download tab, go here, and we might just have to scroll down to find it. Okay, we have it here. If you see here, these are the browsers, okay, and the drivers. Can you see we've got Mozilla Gecko driver, we've got Google Chrome driver, we've got Ghost driver, we've got Edge driver. See, we've got Edge driver as well. HTML unit, this is the one which I was talking about. It's a headless browser. Safari driver. So you've got all the major browser drivers here. What you have to do is you have to download them. You can download them on your own. I'll tell one how to download. So let's say I want to download Chrome driver. So I'll click here on 2.27. It'll take me to Google API's site. Now that's the latest one, 2.27. For Windows who are using Windows 32 and 64, you can download this one. For Windows 32 and 64, people ask me this is 32. No, it works for 64 as well. Okay, those who are using Mac will download this one. Those who are using Linux, for 32 it is this one, for Linux 64 it's this one. Okay, download this one. So let's say you want to download for Windows, download this one. Now when you download it, it looks like this. Okay, this one. Now if you see this folder, I have unzipped it, and you also have to do the same. You need to unzip these folders. Unzip them and look here what is there. Chrome driver.exe. So that's your driver. That's your server. That's your executable. You need it if you want to run your test cases on your Chrome driver, or if you want to run your test cases on Chrome browser. Similarly, download Gecko. If you can see, I've got this Gecko, okay, and this is geekodriver.exe. Follow the same thing, click on the link, download the latest version. All right, let's go back to the slideshow now. All right. Each browser has its own driver on which the application runs. Selenium WebDriver makes direct calls to the browser. So now you know, because we don't need any server in between, as in your RC server kind of thing, or Selenium core kind of thing. Types of web drivers: Chrome, Safari, IE, Firefox, HTML unit, and there are more as well. You've got Edge, you've got Opera, so all the major browser drivers. Okay, we're still continuing WebDriver. These are the features which we've already gone through. I'll just quickly read them. Programming language, so we've got support for all the major programming languages. Browsers, not just these, but all the major browsers. Operating system, Windows, all the versions, Mac, Linux, Android, Ubuntu, all major operating systems. Overcomes limitations of Selenium 1 like file upload, download, pop-ups, and dialog barriers. This was a limitation in RC, like file upload. Now, we can do file upload using a command called sendkeys in Selenium, which we'll see later. And the beauty of WebDriver is we can use third-party tools along with Selenium WebDriver. Okay. Now for upload, I said I can use a Selenium command called sendkeys, and I can also use third-party tools like AutoIT or AutoIt. which I'll be demonstrating later when we'll come to upload portion. Download, we can download stuff, pop-ups and dialog barriers. Now, you might have seen that when you work with different web applications, there's a tendency, not tendency actually, you might just encounter a pop-up. Now that pop-up can be of any type. It could be an alert pop-up, it could be a prompt, or it could be anything. Earlier we were not able to handle them, but in WebDriver we can handle all these alerts. Selenium WebDriver drawbacks. The only drawback that I find in Selenium WebDriver is its report generation thing. WebDriver cannot create any report on its own. We either need to automate the process using framework, for which we need to be efficient with Java. Okay. And the next thing is that we can use TestNG along with Selenium. But WebDriver on its own cannot create a report. And the next point is no centralized maintenance of objects and elements. So we don't have any repository as such wherein we've got these maintenance of objects and elements of different web pages. I hope you now understand what elements and objects are. Okay? All right. Let's come to grid. Okay, so we have to now start with grid. So we'll see what grid is all about. I'll quickly go through the slide first and then I'll explain. Probably I'll create a diagram for you if required. Selenium Grid is used to run multiple test scripts, at the same time on multiple machines. Now if you say at the same time, that means you're doing parallel testing. Parallel execution is achieved with the help of hub node architecture. I'll come to that. Hub can control different test scripts on various browsers, operating system, and programming language in various nodes. Hub and nodes are started using jar files, supports RC test as well as WebDriver test. Now, grid is another feature in Selenium which is beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to explain this to you. Let's say I'll open up my paint. I'll try my best to create a diagram that looks good. Okay. All right. I'm basically creating a few nodes, and that's my master system. Okay, that's my master system. And I'll use this line. Okay. This is my master system. I'm going to call it master or parent. Okay. And this is child 1. This is child 2. This is child 3. And this is child 4. I'm not saying that this is, these many systems you'll have all the time, but the architecture of a grid looks like this. You've got a parent, also called hub here, and these child systems are also called nodes. So you can say that this is node 1, and this is node 2, this is node 3, and this is node 4. What is the use of grid? You can run different test cases at the same time on different systems. When I say different systems, it means all these systems are different, having different operating system and maybe different browsers. Okay. Now let's say that's a Windows system. This is Windows 10. Okay. This is WinXP, for example. Or let's say that's a Mac. And let's say this one is Ubuntu. Okay. And that one is your Linux. So we've got different operating systems on these systems. That's what I want to achieve. How do I achieve? I cannot achieve this using WebDriver, but I can achieve this using Grid. I'll have multiple systems in the environment. I will have one master system which will control these child systems called nodes, and these nodes have different operating systems and maybe different browsers. Let's say Windows 10. This has Your Chrome, for example, okay? And your Mac, this has Safari, okay? And we've got Ubuntu who has Firefox. And let's say we've got Linux again with Chrome for say. All right. Now I'm running test cases on different environments. The very first question that arises is, why do I need this kind of system? So that's the beauty of Selenium. Let's say you have created a very new web application. Okay. Now you don't know whether your client is using Windows 7 or 8 or 10 or XP, or does it have a Mac PC, or maybe he's using Ubuntu as the operating system, and you never know that he's trying to run your application on Linux. What do you want? You want that your application should run absolutely fine no matter what kind of system the client is using. So if you want to test that and you want to speed it up, grid is the choice. You can create a grid and run your test cases parallelly on different environments. Okay, so it's all about having hub and nodes. Now, how do you send instructions from hub to nodes? So for that, we need to do a few configurations. So I'll have to start these nodes because they're different systems. I'll have to start this hub also. So the very first thing you do is you start the hub. So we've got a few commands to do that. And what helps us in running this hub? So we've got a jar called Selenium Server Standalone. Okay. We'll talk about that. We'll be downloading it also. So we have this jar. This is the jar which will help us run hub and also start nodes. And after running a few commands, we'll configure them together so that your hub knows which all nodes have been registered to it. And also your nodes will also know that which is the hub so that I can take instructions from it. So that's how this entire system is created. Now I'll explain the slide. Okay. Okay, the grid is used to run multiple test scripts at the same time on multiple machines. I hope you now understand this line. Parallel execution is achieved with the help of hub node architecture. So I've created the architecture. That's how you run test cases parallelly. Hub can control different test scripts on various browsers, operating systems, and programming languages in various nodes. Okay, I missed that point. Now, it is not important whether you're using Java here on this system or some other language here, some other language here, some other language here. Okay? You can use one language to write your script, because when you create this structure, you will be sending all the instructions only through your hub. The execution will happen on your nodes, but all the instruction part will happen here on hub. Your hub will be directing your nodes. Let's say on hub, I'm saying that I want to run my test cases on Safari. Okay, so obviously I'll have to do that configuration in my script. Okay, I'll have to write that you have to run the test cases on the node which has Safari on it and Mac has the operating system. And it can use any language. You're least bothered about it because Selenium supports all the major languages. So that's how it happens. Okay. Selenium Hub can control different test scripts on various browsers, operating system, programming language, and various nodes. Hub and nodes are started using jar files. So how do you run this entire system? You first start hub and then the nodes. So both of them are started using a jar file called Selenium Server Standalone. It supports RC test as well as WebDriver test. So you can run both. Okay. I haven't worked with RC in Grid, so cannot comment much on it. But yes, of course, you can use your WebDriver commands. Hands-on, handling elements on Edureka's homepage. Now, see, when we'll be working with Grid, that time I'll tell you how you can use command prompt to run your hubs and nodes, how to start them. So we'll be talking about every suite in detail. Okay, not IDE and RC actually, okay, because I've already covered IDE. We might just take a class on IDE. But RC, of course, not. And then WebDriver, we'll have all the detailed thing, all the commands, all kind of commands. So whether they are simple commands, whether they are your WebDriver commands, whether they are classes. okay, whether there are other interfaces in Selenium. So we'll be looking at those functions and APIs and classes in the later classes. Grid is done, but we'll have another class wherein we'll be actually creating a grid. We'll create a grid and run the test cases so that you know how this grid behaves. Okay, now in this class, what I'm going to do is, how I'm going to end this class is, I'll be writing a small script. Now, before I write that script, I'll tell you how to create an environment so that you can start writing your Selenium scripts. So we'll be downloading a few things. Okay, we'll follow that up. Once that is done, I'll write a small script taking Edureka as my use case, and I'll maybe perform a few actions just to give you a brief what you can achieve by automation, or what you can achieve using Selenium. That'll not be the entire thing, okay? It'll be a small example, but it'll give you a picture that what wonders you can do using automation or using Selenium as your automation tool. Okay, I'll just quickly say thank you. And thank you very much for staying intact for these 3 long hours. I hope you enjoyed today's class. Till we come back with the next class, enjoy. Bye-bye.